Thank you for joining Beyond the Workbench, a podcast where Odin and Michael Magnus discuss life, business, and how to help entrepreneurs grow and innovate. Well, here we are halfway through the year already. I don't know how that happened or where the time has gone, but I don't know about you. Summers are always kind of an interesting time for us with the family and the kids and whatnot. Fortunately, everybody's pretty respectful and we figure it out, but it has changed the pace as to kind of everything there. How about you guys? Any summer plans?
No. This summer, we don't really have any big plans. I've had so many changes recently with, my workflow and things like that. So we are, we're pretty grounded this summer. I mean, I've done some traveling, as you know, we were in Sheridan and a few other places in Atlanta and Salt Lake City and all these other places. So that's kind of kept me moving. But in terms of like summer plans with the family, no, nothing really. But just to tag on what you're saying, summer's typically tough for me because it throws a routine off, right? During the school year, kids get up at a certain time, drop them off at school. I'm at the workshop by a certain time and the day moves on. I'm on meetings, whatever. But during the summer, like I said, everyone's on summer break. And so it tends to be a little looser, there may be like bits of the day that are routine, like around our house still like 7 to 10 a.m. is still fairly routine because my kids are in sports and they're training, almost every day of the week. But after that, it's all, who knows what the day is going to yield. My wife is fortunate. She kind of bears the burden of most of that. I'm very fortunate about that, but I still have to jump in there, when I can. Like today was all about dentist appointments and getting ready for next week, which is they're back to training. So there's always something. It's hard to plan around that stuff.
Yeah. Your wife plays a very interesting role. We should have her on the podcast sometime because she is chief operating officer of the business, but still also of Odin. And so she plays
all of it.
Yeah, she plays a very interesting role, not only in the business, but also in just kind of managing the family and making sure everybody needs to be where they need to be. So we'll have to bring her on sometime and get her perspective on life and the business and everything else.
I may have to step away for that one so she can talk freely and I don't interrupt her and just let her have the conversation. But she definitely would have her own perspective about business, about life. She's, as a mom, as a part business owner, as someone who's she's a technician here. She does everything. At one point in time or another, she's going to do it all. There's a lot of moving pieces there, a lot of plates. She's spinning at any given time, and all very important plates. So they don't always get the same attention as some of the things that I'm doing, right? But no less important than what I'm pushing around day to day, for sure.
Yeah, and I always enjoy seeing your Instagram content where it's the two of you and she's interviewing you in the shop, and it makes it look so simple and natural. And I don't know if she's just kind of like surprising you while you're in the middle of spraying glue or whatever, but it feels very organic and natural and personal. But you can also tell that it isn't something that requires a ton of planning and time to just kind of make some content around that.
There's some thought that we put behind it for sure. But not deep thought, right? The thought was, as this business has grown and expanded over the years, one of the problems, it's a great thing and a problem, is that people still want to talk just to me often. They call, they email, they stop by the store, and, I've got a team of folks here. We're a small team still, but my team, they're very capable of answering questions. Rochelle my wife is very, very capable of answering any question that comes through through. And then when people don't want to talk to her, they don't want to talk to the guy. They don't want to talk to Odin. They're not trying to be mean or sexist or anything like that. They just see me as the front. And that's fair. But we have been working on ways to pull her towards the front, right? We're working on ways to let people see her as a major impact, and a part of this business because she is. And so finding ways to casually get her to lend her voice to the conversation and be in content has been a planned thing. But then once we decided that was a real thing that we were going to do, then it turned into, okay, how can we do it in a natural way that doesn't like turn it into one more job for her, one more job for me? And simply it was, how about this? You see me in the workshop. We need to do this once every other week or something like that. Grab the camera and just start asking questions because she gets all the emails usually anyway. She knows what people are wanting to, asking. So, well, ask away. And that's what she does. And then she just tells me to try to keep my answers short. It's worked out. People respond pretty well to it, actually.
Yeah, I enjoy it. Well, you mentioned before we hopped on that you were finishing up working on a project. What's on the workbench this week?
Well, this week is a lot of belts. This is belt week. So this is what happens. Like we're stocking both stores and they're all in store course. It is either we are chock full of belts. They're everywhere, any size you want, any color you want, we have them. And then all of a sudden we blink and then there's no belts at all. Right. So last week we blinked and we're like, oh crap, we don't have enough inventory on the shelf and we got to get through the summer and all these different things. So it has been basically a week and a half, 2 weeks of just cranking out belts. I think, and I'm not going to say me because it's my guys. Before Fortune, we have a team, so the guys have been the really ones that I kind of set the trestle board and work board for everyone, and then they go after it. I think we've done no less than 250 belts probably in the last 2 weeks, and they're still finishing off the 250. There's probably, if I think about it, there's probably 50 belts on the workbench right now. So that's been the story of the workshop for the last, week and a half, 2 weeks, something like that. And then I've been working on just more designs. So I have a goal. Almost every product is going to get redesigned or refreshed here at Odin and Magnus. Some of my designs I've been using for, I don't know, 10 years, and they really haven't received much of an update. I mean, the designs work, they're great, products are great, and they're lasting and durable, but it's time for a little refresh. I want to do some new things. And so I am spending my time really going through that list of products and fleshing it out. The interview last time we talked with Dave Munson, actually, I had already started this process, but he said a few key things in that interview when we were talking to him about product design and branding and, different elements of the products that represent his brand, not because of the logo on it, but because there's certain design choices that are present in every product they make for that series. And I was like, yeah, I like that a lot. I like that. Far more difficult to actually implement, but the thought of every one of our products having some commonality and some common, design choices through the entire product line is really attractive. I don't know if we're going to achieve that this round, but it's a goal at least.
So in that episode, we started the episode joking that Odin Leather Goods started because of saddleback leather, but we gave no context to that statement.
Sure.
Do you want to share a little bit about that story and what we were talking about before the microphone started rolling?
Yeah. So I've probably told the story in different ways and, different angles on it, but it's all the same story, which is I found leathercraft not haphazardly, just on a whim. I was trying to get out of the house, out of that. Well, the time of the hospital, it's a different story. My kid being in the hospital, and I was searching around, but the desire to even give it a shot. I walked into a supply store, bought some materials. The thing that I was going to make, I decided to make that thing, which was a laptop sleeve, because I knew I needed one. The one I wanted is one I really couldn't afford, or I didn't want to afford it. However you want to say that, there's a difference there at the time. So I thought I'd give it a shot. One of the products I was thinking about was one of Dave's or Saddleback's products, which I had come to really admire. Now, not only did I admire the products, I'm a marketing guy through and through. That's been my background for so many years. But I really admire, and we spent a lot of time talking to him about this on the last episode, was his marketing prowess and his power and his thoughtfulness that his company and his brand has put to play here. And so that's what I really appreciate. And that's part of the reason why Saddleback was top of mind then. But to be fair, there is one other company I think that was top of mind that really pushed me to try some things, and that was Colson Keene. I don't know if you're familiar with that brand. I don't follow them as much as I used to. Colson Keene was another one of those brands that was very much so like inspiration to me getting started with leathercraft. In fact, probably in the early days, many of my designs were probably more aligned to Colson Keene. I use the word simple, not meaning they're dumbed down by no means, but they just have a less ornate and direct style. And I really gravitated towards that. So Colson Keene, Saddleback, and I can probably pick out a few others are the ones that it's like, hey, yeah, I like those products. Those are really cool products. I don't want to afford to buy them right now myself, but what if I can just get ever so close to designing something that is respectful of those designs, something I can say, well, look, it's kind of close to it, maybe, and that's where the whole journey started. Really, it's just trying to get a laptop bag, a laptop sleeve to get me in and out of the office during the day.
And now here you are making 250 belts.
250 belts, yeah. And I didn't mention this. Monday, I went to Conroe, Texas, to figure out how I can bump that number from 250 up to 1,000, a month, something like that. So there's another large supplier down in the Conroe area I went to go visit, and I've been meaning to get down. I talk to him every now and then online and through email. Campbell Randall down there in Conroe. They used to be on Yoakum years ago when I first met them, but they're a massive supplier of factory equipment for leather production, shoes, textiles, things like that. They don't really serve, the mid-market, what I call the mid-market, where I sit. We are just above crafter, but we're doing business of significance, but we're not coming close to say a major leather, supply house, right? I mean, Dave Munson is really, I would say, Saddleback is just kind of creeping into that space right now. They're far bigger than we are, but there's a big difference between me and Dave. There's a big difference between Dave and say Fossil or Louis Vuitton or Gucci, who have these massive, facilities for producing, leather goods. Campbell services those group of people more than anything. But occasionally they have these tools there that are nice to know about and that we can maybe afford at times and leverage in our businesses. So I go down there occasionally and talk to them about, here's a problem I'm having. I'm only able to produce 250 belts this week. How do I get that 250 up to 500? What's the small things I can change here, machinery I can bring in to help with that? And they're always very, very kind, even though I would be a almost insignificant customer to them. They're always very kind to share the information with me, and maybe they're hoping I get to that level at some point. But had some good conversations, expensive conversations, but I got some good ideas I'm playing around with in my head that we may be able to launch later in 2026.
I go back a lot to a conversation that I had with Swift Hammer Leather, Brandon. And we've talked about this in our classes a few times because I always bring it up. I think it's just such insightful methodology. And what he had talked about was how he went through and painstakingly documented the process to make a wallet. Mm-hmm. And every single little step and assigning time to it to figure out where that time is.
Yeah.
And
very important.
Then looking at, okay, well, if I'm spending 20% of my time hand sewing these wallets, does that make my product worth 20% more money? If the answer is no, is that necessarily the right place for him to invest for his customer base, right? Some people do care about that. And also when you break it down like that, you start to identify where maybe could I get a machine to help with this step that's time consuming, or where can I hire somebody and say, here's the 40 steps that go into this process. If you can take 3 through 7, I could double my production speed. And, I share that story a lot, but not just in the maker community. I've talked about that story this week at work, where we do search engine optimization for semiconductors. But just the idea of breaking down processes to such a degree that you can really identify optimizations and places to really scale. But when you were moving up from just you and then hiring more people, what do you think the tipping point was from when you decided it's going to pay off to pay somebody to join me?
Well, I wish I could say I had some really great, thoughtful way of attacking that question. I didn't, right? So a lot of my thoughts on it now was after I've already got through that growing pain and that learning curve. I was very resistant to bring anybody else on the team because I was worried about how am I going to teach them to do it my way. Even things like, hey, if I bring somebody else in here and they're already in leathercraft, will they steal my ideas and they just run off with all my stuff, right? Those are all real questions that most of us have to deal with. It was when I finally did have someone help me because I was in a tough spot. I had a lot of work to do, and at some point in time, no matter how much hustle I talk about, no matter how much I talk about optimizing our workflows for ourselves, there's only so much you're going to get out of an individual or out of yourself. And so I finally did bring somebody else in because I was just at my wit's end. And I remember having this feeling at the end of that day, or maybe the next day or something like that. And I was like, that was interesting. It's almost like we had 2 people in here working at the same time. It's like, that's amazing. It actually was helpful having 2 people here. It's like, and of course it seems like so dumb, like, well, yeah, because you had 2 people there. Why wouldn't it be like more productive? But until you actually experience it at times, it's hard to really process it that way. And so that's kind of what's going to be down the journey of asking questions like, hey, what is it that I actually have to do myself versus I can hand off somebody else? What are my customers paying for? Yes, these are Odin leather good products, but what are they paying for? Is it that they expect for Odin's hands to be on every single piece, every burnish, every piece of, a bit of glue applied, every stitch, whatever? What are they expecting, right? If I was to hire someone, like sometimes you can do like outsourcing, or you can do like third parties where, hey, There was a point in time where I had people that were local, and I'd say, instead of you coming to my workshop and working tonight, how about you just come pick up these pieces, you take them at home with you, and you do it all at home, right? So you can say, well, that's not really an employee. That's more like a contract. Okay, whatever. Break it down however you want. But the fact of the matter is, I gave them material. They're doing it my way. I'm getting more done. They're doing burnishing edges, so that means I can go do something else, right? These aren't necessarily the things that make the products what they are. What makes the products what they are is the design and thoughtfulness that go into it. Not necessarily that I put my hand on, in this case, burnishing every edge. And so that's where I started to pull things out and say, hey, what is it that I actually don't have to do, and then hand that stuff off.
Well, it's kind of interesting that you say that too, because if we look at the history of leatherwork and when it was largely popularized in the 40s and 50s and 60s, a lot of the big name leatherworkers, they would not be the ones to make a pair of boots.
Not at all.
They would tool a piece of it. Someone would bring them the leather, they would do the tooling, and they would give it back to the boot maker. Yeah. And so what you're talking about is, not unprecedented and actually almost a sign of when you can get to a certain level of success that you can segment pieces of that work where somebody with an expertise or a specialty can take care of the piece that only they can do. Right. And then partnering with other people who can, fill the gaps and some of that too. So
a couple of angles I think about is one, I before I move on, I think about like saddle shops. Like I remember talking to Jim, and he was talking about these large saddle shops in the Midwest and California, how they're filled with people who are just be there tooling all day long, or they're just doing one part of a saddle. Well, each one of those people were craftsmen in their own right, but you don't know their names, right? They didn't want to run a business. They didn't know how to run a business. All they knew was to be a technician of that one thing, tooling belts, latigos, whatever, cutting this, doing the ground seat, whatever. By the way, I don't know what any of those things are. Those are just things I've heard about, so I'm tossing them out there. I think those are part of sales. I'll put it out there like that. But they were specialty things of some sort, right? That they did really, really well. The name of the saddle maker, the company, right? His main job was to keep them employed and sell saddles, right? And make sure those products were in the marketplace. And as I move around, I talk to the crafters. I do find often that this is a benefit for me. I do find often that a lot of crafters don't actually want to be business people. They want to be crafters. Their passion is in the craft, not in the running the business. And those are two different things. I mean, we all know people who do absolutely stunning and beautiful work. Stunning work, right? World-class work, but have no interest in running a business, no interest in doing marketing, no interest in getting new customers. And unfortunately, a lot of folks will not pay them for their work because they don't know about it. But then you have other folks that don't mind doing both. I actually enjoy both, even though it can be very tedious at times. So, another thing is we hope to be able to give people that are great crafters a home to do the craft and work and do fabulous work, during the day. And they just have to worry about being here and getting through the work on their workbench versus having to run the business. That's what I take on as a business owner. And my wife and I take on, that's what we support them with. And it's so far as working out. Now, granted, we don't have a factory of people here. We only have 2 guys here to help me in the workshop. But they're both, in the right, they're both great leather crafters, and they do wonderful work on their own. They still do work on their own under their own brands. But during the day, they don't have to worry about that. During the day, all they have to do is get through the stuff that's on their workbench. So that's how things have always been done. And it's a pretty efficient system when there's mutual respect. Mostly in leathercraft space, I do find that there's a great deal of mutual respect. So you can have artists, you can have crafters working under another brand, and everyone takes care of each other and respects that relationship really well.
Yeah, it's interesting. Even when we were in Sheridan, kind of to your point, I've always associated the Sheridan style with Don King and the King Saddlery in Sheridan. And it's not until you really get into the history and talk to the people that you discover the role of people like Bill Gardner, who maybe is responsible for the Sheridan style as we know it today. But that's not the name that you necessarily hear as much because he was the guy at the bench, and I think over time, people have started to seek that kind of history and are very interested in the origins and kind of unsung heroes. But there's a lot of people that they're less worried about having their name on everything. Their concern is doing good work. And I think sometimes those are the people that don't get as much credit that should.
Yeah, I mean, I know you can debate and just these capitalist discussions about, what should and what that's worth and all that kind of stuff. You think about like a Steve Jobs and Apple, right? Steve Jobs didn't actually do all the programming for the iPhone, right? He didn't do it all by himself. There was a teams of really smart, brilliant people back there coming up with a lot of these things. And Steve Jobs maybe was just a person who was able to bring together into one cohesive vision and deliver it to the marketplace. And that's where people assign, all their accolades and the value of the company and things like that. And there's fairness there, right? I mean, everyone can't stand out, but I think if you are a business owner, you show respect for those people. That's one thing. I'm also thinking about people like there's other industries like the spirits industry. Like you think about Uncle Nearest. I don't know if you know the story about Uncle Nearest, but it's Jack Daniels, right? Everybody knows Jack Daniels as a whiskey company, right? But the main guy distilling everything was a guy named Nearest, right? Nearest was the main guy and happened to be an African-American guy, former slave who was, there at the distillery there, who was his master distiller, but no one knows that guy's name. And he had been lost to history for years and years, but he is the one responsible for all of what Jack Daniels is in terms of the flavor and the bottling, things like that. And in fact, if you go back and look at old pictures, the reason why people even asked about this person is because like, who is that guy? Given the timeline, things like that, it wasn't common for a black guy to be sitting there in the middle of a picture next to the owner of a company. And people start saying, well, what gives? Why is he there? That's a point. That's a position of sitting at the right hand of this guy is a position of notoriety. Who is this person? People started digging. It's like, oh, this is Uncle Nearest. He's actually the one responsible. He's the one running the distillery. He's the one that came up with all the flavors and profiles and things like that. But you don't know that. All you know is Jack Daniels, right? Is that fair? Is it not fair? It's debatable. I mean, someone's got to hold the burden of running the business and all the things that go along with that. And as a business owner, that's my role here that's my burden. My job is to keep the door open. My job is to make sure everyone's getting paid and everyone has work to do. And obviously I like to brag about my guys, my team, and even the young ladies that work in the retail store. I mean, that's what makes us who we are right now. Maybe other companies don't always have to share that same mutual respect and admiration for their people. We do here, but yeah, typically people know me more than anything because, I'm the one that started it and kept things going. But now it's my wife, it's Riley, it's Brandon, it's Drew, and the list goes on and on. And I can do any of it without them.
It's interesting. There's a book, actually a series of books by a guy named Gino Wickman. And one of them is called Traction. And then there's another book that's kind of a follow-up, Get a Grip. That's more of a kind of narrative story approach to sharing the same information. Anyway, he has a series of books. And one of the big kind of core themes in these books is that you have people who are visionaries, but they can't get anything done unless they also have implementers. And you look at the dynamics of teams and you have all of these different roles that support the visionary, but, without those people making sure that kind of you see things through, visionary doesn't get much traction.
No, not at all. I mean, in fact, usually the visionary people, they tend to get further and further away from the work, the actual hands-on work as time goes on, because they've got to spend a lot of time in their brain power doing that visionary stuff, right? That's just the nature of companies and growing a company. You can't keep your hands in all the pots at all times. I certainly have to deal with that here, and we're a small company, but it's something that happens every day. I tell stories to people that it used to make me terrify me and it used to scare me when I'd walk out of this office and I didn't know what was going on out there. I'd walk to the back and there'd be, Riley, one of the young ladies back there, she's shipping packages. I don't know I don't know what's in those boxes. I don't know where they're going. I don't know if she's packaging them right. And I was like, what's going on? I need to check all that. I need to check all that before it goes up because it's going to cost a lot of money if we make a mistake. Now I walk back through there. My job is to stay the heck out of all their way, right? When Riley's doing her thing in the back and she's packaging up things, just get out of her way. Don't touch it. Leave it alone. Don't breathe on it. And she actually gives me a look to say, get out of my space. I've now found great comfort in that because it means that we're growing to the point where I can't have my finger on everything. I can't know everything that's going on around here at all times. That's a good thing. If I could know all those things, that means we're not growing. So I've walk out of here. I go look at Brandon and Drew. They got things on the workbench. Generally speaking, I know what we're working on. I mean, they're all my designs, they're all my bags and my processes and things like that. But I don't know at every moment of the day what part of the process they're in. I don't know, I have a trestle board or work board and, they're working on the list. And I keep on adding things to the bottom of the list and they're just working through it. Where they're on the list at any time, I don't know. We can go ask them. They'll tell you. And heck, what I've got out of that also is I've got a lot of great feedback from them. It's like, that tells me, hey, if we just modify this one little process here, we do this thing a little differently here, this would be a lot better. I'm like, well, that's not how I've always done it. They're like, yeah, well, I know you've always done it this other way, but with my brain power, it can show you that this doing it differently would be better. I'm like, well, heck yeah, let's do it the better way. And that's how a team works. And it's just required, again, I'll go back to it. It requires everyone to have a mutual respect for each other and their role here, right? My guys know that I am not out in the marketplace telling everyone that I'm doing it all by myself. And it's very important to me that people know that it's not just me. And because of that, I think they have a lot of trust in me that, that I'm going to present their work the right way. So it's all our work together. Anyway, I can go on and on about that, but you got to grow. It's going to take people. It's going to take a team. People that build teams are going to grow faster and they're going to grow stronger. If you can't build a team, you're going to be by yourself for a long time. It's going to be tough. Can it be done? Sure, it can be done. It's just a longer road, much longer road.
Yeah. Talking about growth, we were talking a little bit before we started recording, and there's something I've been thinking about a lot this week. I started doing this course through UT on something called product management, which is largely related to software development. But a lot of the core principles are business 101. That's just been a really interesting reminder when going through some of these things to think about, well, why don't we do that as small business owners? These are very obvious things that, and maybe we even did them when we started, but we just haven't in a while. And one of those that was very evident to me this week and ties into this idea of growth and whatnot is the idea of a product market fit and making sure, everybody, when they get their business rolling and they get it started, they have ideas, they often even have a customer in mind. And then you continue to grow and you continue to grow. And it's easy to lose sight of that. And then before you know it, you either have decreasing sales or you're not getting as many new customers as you had hoped. And it largely comes from trying to go too wide too quickly, trying to serve too many new customers versus serving the ones you have really well.
Yeah.
But also just sometimes losing touch. There's simple things like surveys or asking for feedback from customers that, either when they're buying something or somebody who used to buy things a lot and they haven't in a while, and just touching base, finding out why. And there's so much to learn about your business that you may just be making assumptions, or you may not have even noticed.
Yeah.
You may be so busy that you haven't noticed, oh, I haven't seen that person in a while. Where'd they go? And so
for us, is we haven't sold the thing in a while. It's a real problem. This is a real task. I know your book is probably more related to bigger businesses, but this definitely translates into small businesses, craft businesses, and things like that very, very well. I know I was talking to a friend recently, another business owner, and their business has been under a lot of pressures, and a lot of those pressures are probably related to them doing too much, period. Right. For us, for small business owners, and I'm not excluded from this. I think it happens to me as well. We have to constantly fight to realign ourselves between what's a passion/hobby and what's a business, right? As a passion/hobby, we just want to do cool stuff, man. We want to make cool stuff. We want to have fun. We want to try this new thing that we saw. I want to get this new piece of equipment and machinery and all this great stuff, make this new design. But as a business owner, the job is to generate revenue and generate security for your team and your employees, right? Which means that you need to hold the course often to know that's a really cool thing to do over there, but your product line is this. Stay committed to your product line, or ask the tough questions over time that says, hey, I know you said this is your product. This is something you really enjoy making and love, but no one's buying a thing, right? Which means either there's not an interest for it in the marketplace, or it means that you're not positioning it the right way, but something's got to change. And so maybe while you as an individual love it, maybe the marketplace is not responding. Okay, well, what are you going to do? You're going to die on that hill? As a hobbyist, an artist, as a technician or whatever, maybe it is a hill you're willing to die on. But as a business owner, no, you got to move on. You got to cut bait, or you've got to make changes. And I find myself in that position a lot. It is a tough thing to deal with. I now see why you have founders of companies step out of the way in later years. Say, you know what, I'm going to bring in a new CEO or a new CMO or president of this company. I'm going to stay involved as a visionary, which we just talked about, but I'm going to let somebody come in and run this company. Because as those companies get bigger, there are different demands and different things that need to be considered. And I definitely see that. I'm nowhere near that at the moment personally, but I definitely see why that could be useful later, where you have someone else come in with a new vision to run the company.
Well, and I think what's interesting too, and I want your perspective on this, in this idea of product market fit, which again is a little bit more of an advanced business principle, but the core piece of it still applies, right? But one of the pieces of that is that, let's say that you're making belts,
Mm-hmm.
and maybe you get bored of making belts, so you want to start making wallets.
Mm-hmm.
But sometimes that's where the business falters because you really haven't perfected the art of making belts. You haven't figured out how to make them more efficient. You haven't figured out how to make them more effectively, more profitable.
Mm-hmm.
And so all of a sudden you're offering new things before you've really kind of narrowed and mastered and built, kind of met the needs of your customer, even with that first product. But with that, I guess my question for you is, I don't know that you get inspired to make belts every day. So what are the projects that you do for you that are
Mm-hmm.
kind of scratch that itch? Maybe it's a little bit of R&D, maybe it's
Yeah.
just something for fun. But what do you do to make sure that you're not getting distracted from your core business, even when it's not as exciting as something else could be?
Mm. Well, again, this is where I don't think I have a good answer for you. I mean, it's a great question, but what do I do to make sure I'm not getting distracted from the core business? I do. I do get distracted from the core business often, I'm sure, right? I have apologized first to my wife, and then I begged her for help. And I'll explain that now, which is I apologize because I know that I don't always want to hear feedback, right? You're not the designer. You didn't come up with this, right? You don't understand the markets. These guys, you don't understand these guys. For whatever reason, you're not attuned to this. But I'm attuned. I think I'm attuned to these customers, right? So I apologize. Like, I know it's going to be tough. I know it's not always going to be. We're not going to agree with each other when we give each other feedback. Or what I mean by we, I mean her giving me feedback, of course, to tell me that something's not quite aligned where we need it to be, because I'm attached to it some kind of way, emotionally or, creatively, whatever. But even though it may be uncomfortable, I do ask her to continue to tell me when she doesn't agree with something, right? Let me prove to you, let me tell you why I understand this better than you do. Let me tell you why this is a better way to go versus this other thing, right? I don't want to have to do that. I'd like to just be able to make decisions because I said so thing, right? And I could. I mean, we could push things around, but then we'd be unhappy in many ways. One, business probably would not be as good as it is. Relationships would be tough, right? There needs to be space for them. As co-business owner, she needs to have the ability to give her input. And actually, as another co-business owner, I actually need that feedback. I need that pushback. I need to have those discussions. I can't be designing and running a business all by myself and all the creativity just comes to me. I mean, you start talking to yourself in an echo chamber at that point, right? And the crazies inside your head are telling you that you have a good idea. Well, really, it's a really bad idea. It doesn't make any sense, right? It doesn't make any sense because you can't explain to anybody else. Well, you need those type of people in your life to help you with that. That should be your business partners. It should be, your family and friends. If you don't have those people, then you go find other business owners that you could talk to and bounce ideas off of and share, and, freely and be vulnerable with when it comes out of things like that. It is not always easy. It's not always comfortable, but I do try to keep in top of my mind that it is absolutely required to grow a thriving business to have that type of that system support. So that's what I do. It is not comfortable at times. I don't always agree with it at times, but it usually, in the grand scheme of things, usually yields a better result when we allow ourselves to get feedback like that. So anyway, my wife, I had to apologize to her up front. I know I'm not always going to respond properly to her feedback, but truth be told, the feedback is absolutely necessary. So when I have an idea for a bag or design or this new product line, I need to share it with other people. I need to write it down. I need to talk. I mean, sometimes that would be you, to be honest with you. I mean, you need people to tell you and challenge you on your ideas. And I search for those people. I search for those discussions.
And I think that can also come into play the role of like a good consultant, and I think that's something that people shy away from a lot because it can be expensive. And
Yeah.
I'm not saying go get some high dollar MBA consultant, but somebody who knows your business or maybe knows your business better than you,
Yeah.
knows your industry, and man, getting somebody for half a day. I mean, I do that for some people. They'll come and they'll bring me in for half a day and just look at everything with fresh eyes. But at the same time, I recognize when I need that.
Yeah.
Even as the person who other people go to get business feedback, I recognize my limitations because, I need to kind of look at things differently.
Man, I've done consulting for years, and For other people, I can walk in someone else's business and I can talk to them about, hey, here are the challenges that I can see just on the top, things that we need. I talked to my friend, just a week ago about, we were going through parts of his business and I could very clearly see the challenges and solutions to those things. Right. But that's me talking about his business. Right. When it's yours, you actually need someone to come back. Just because you can do it for someone else doesn't mean you can do it for yourself. I mean, you've heard the barber,
Mm-hmm.
the barber always needs a haircut. The cobbler's kids have no shoes. Those little sayings. It's very true, right? I can look at your business. You and I can go back and forth. We can break it down and say these are the areas, because it's a very non-biased, or it's a separated view into what's going on with you. But when it's yours, there's emotions, there's fears, there's anxieties, all these other things that cloud your decision making, right? I mean, it works, just because you can do it for someone else doesn't mean you can do it yourself. So having a consultant, having a trusted advisor of some sort to come in and help you sort through those things and point at you and say, hey, yeah, dude, I don't know if you're really looking at this with the right angle, right set of glasses. Again, very tough. Don't always want to hear it, because they're basically criticizing what you thought at times was the best thing, since sliced bread, and they're telling you it's not. But, I'd rather somebody tell me sooner than later than let me go down that path and waste a bunch of money and a bunch of people's time and harm the business as long term. Consultants, however you want to look at it, big, small, formal, and informal, I think are invaluable. I mean, if you don't have that network of people to bounce these ideas off of, and I'm not talking about your aunt and your cousin, right, who have no sense of business or no business acumen at all, and they don't know about marketing or what you do. I'm not talking about that group. I'm talking about people who have a sense of how things work, a sense of how marketplaces work, a sense of how business moves from point A to point B. Maybe a different industry, right? Still business, still, capitalism. I mean, that's who you want to have in your corner. And I actually think there's probably more people out there that be willing to give you that advice and give you that information and share with you, because they need those discussions to happen also, than we believe. They don't have to know your business in and out. They have to be willing to share and talk and have a cup of coffee every now and then at the base level. Have some friends you can have coffee with once a month and say, hey, man, I'm dealing with this. Have you ever experienced anything like this? Yes. Okay. Well, how'd you get through it?
Yeah, and I think even if somebody doesn't have the answers, somebody who knows how to ask the right questions
Mm.
is a very valuable person to bring in, because they're going to look at things with fresh perspective. They're going to ask you very direct questions, and it makes you really think about your answers. And if the answer that you came up with 3 years ago, is that still your answer? And if not, maybe that's why you've lost some momentum, or, and so I do think that even just having somebody to help you think through your own kind of situation can be really helpful in figuring out the next steps of a plan.
Yeah. So for you, I know I talked about some of the projects and how we're busy in the workshop, but what about you? I mean, what projects are you working on, maybe on your day job, but also, you have a lot of things going on the peripheral, what's happening?
All the time. I'm not very good at recognizing a need and not assigning myself to help resolve it. Just as far as actually like my Workbench, I did get the Maker's Leather Supply mystery box, which is no longer a mystery anymore. They're pretty transparent about it, but it is always kind of a fun thing to, when you don't necessarily have the headspace to start something entirely from scratch, getting something that's a little bit more guided can be helpful in jumping back in and getting that momentum, because it's been a minute since I've
Sure.
done a project.
How long have you been getting the mystery box, if I may ask?
It depends. It just depends on the project. But inevitably, what always ends up happening is I'll say, well, if I'm already paying for shipping,
Mm-hmm.
let me see what else that I think would be interesting. And a lot of the time, it's not that I'll buy things that I don't need. Okay, it is that I'll buy things that I don't need. However, I will do so because I'm curious. It comes from a place of curiosity. It's not just, oh, I need to own that. It's, I've heard of this product and I've never used it. Let me throw it in there and test it out. Or, so I always do get a few new things, just because that's part of the creative process for me, is experimentation, and not just with leather work and making things. Like even for dinner tonight, I cooked with tofu. I've never in my life cooked with tofu, but I was just kind of curious if I could,
Right.
right? And I was kind of giving an unexpected ingredient, and it turned out pretty decent.
Cool.
I probably won't make a habit of it, but I, I do think it's kind of important to give ourselves those interesting little challenges here and there.
Yeah.
Just to satiate the curiosity. And sometimes that's where innovation comes. Doing the same thing the same way all the time is not going to come up with new ideas, but
Yeah.
being open to some kind of failure, new failure, is often how you discover some things. So
I've done some of that this year where I tend to be fairly creative, but at times you do hit a kind of a blank where you're like, I don't know what to design. I don't know what to edit. I don't know what else to make. And so I've definitely have gone and picked up projects from other folks and say, I'm just going to make their project. There may be some one little aspect of their project that I think is cool, like I've never done before. Like, I'll just go do that. They've already got it laid out for you, the materials, or whatever, and they've got the designs. Go do that. And most people never see it because, I don't want to, I'm not going to sell someone else's, designs, but I learned that way. And oftentimes I'll get something, either I'm going to learn a new technique or tool out of it. So there may be some aspect that ends up in one of my designs later, right, as a result of those projects. But yeah, when you aren't creative enough to do it all on your own, jump on some of these other things. I mean, there's lots of YouTube channels and resources out there, and some really guys and gals out there doing some really outstanding things that, if it's going to shove, just go learn something new and go do what they're making and see if that inspires you to do something different.
Well, and I'll say even starting this podcast, which is something new and different, and I've learned a lot about the different ways that they're structured and analytics and all the different softwares and supports. But even something so simple as starting new social media pages, I know that seems like such an arbitrary thing, but it has given me such a new, fresh perspective of the industry that I've spent quite a few years in at this point. Because you follow the people that you follow, and the algorithms put things in front of you that it knows that you want to see, and you create something new. And sometimes you're just exposed to a totally different perspective.
Absolutely.
And so even something as little as starting a couple new social media pages for a podcast and following new different people that I don't follow personally has given me a lot of new ideas.
Getting outside that echo chamber, I guess not even echo chamber, but just getting outside of that train track, right, that you're on, to see what else is out there in the world, I think is important. But it's tough to do, especially when you're busy and you only have so much time to dedicate to growth. It's tough to force yourself to open up to these new things. It's funny. So let me ask you this. This is a little off the cuff thing. What's one tool, resource, thing, skill set that you learned, that you came in contact with, like in the last 2 weeks, that you said, I got to learn more about that thing? Like, I'll just, maybe this helps. I'll tell you one thing for me: Google Vids, or Vids, Google, however they call it. But it's like Google's AI video editor. I use AI. I've used it for all kinds of things, but granted, that's a really broad term. But I've never used Google's video editing platform. And I heard someone, trusted contact of mine, friend of mine, say something about this week, and they were going on and on about. I was like, hey, I think I'm missing the ball here. I've got to figure out, how do you use AI for this thing, video editing and all this type of stuff, right? Past the just doing funny reels and whatnot. So I'm going to dig in. That's my goal in the next 2 weeks, is kind of figure out, how do I use AI for video editing? Because I've never personally done it, past, social posts. It's been there. I just never had time, never took time to figure it out. So that's what I'm doing. I'm going to figure it out. I don't know what's going to come out of it, but when I'm done 2 weeks from now, maybe by the next time we have an episode, I can tell you, yeah, it's a bunch of malarkey. I'm not going to do that anymore. Or I can tell you that, no, it actually is the greatest thing ever. I don't know where I'll end up, but we'll see.
It's funny that you say that, because actually I will say some of the more interesting things that I've learned in the last 2 weeks are AI related as well, which is funny that we have this podcast about a workbench and now we're talking about AI, but it's all part of it.
All part of it.
But the thing that I've been using it for more recently is not, hey, go write this for me. This is what I believe to be the marketing message. Mm-hmm. Tell me 5 assumptions that I'm making based on this information. Mm-hmm. And then having it come back and say, here's things that you're assuming are true for this statement to be true. And then it's really insightful, and kind of using it as almost an introspective tool. Yeah. Maybe even serving as that consultant sometimes. And then, you can take it a step further and say, give me 3 ways to test these assumptions. Mm-hmm. And using it that way. The other thing that I found is a very useful prompt if anybody's kind of playing around with AI stuff. And I don't think it's as scary as a lot of other people do. And I think it's a tool, just like anything else. I can certainly see where there's some things that it could be potentially be problematic in
Mhm.
some ways, but realistically, it's valuable. And what I've found is most people just have to try it once or twice, and they're like, "Oh, okay, I get it."
Mhm.
It's scary until you do it, and then you're like, "Oh, okay." But the thing that I've found has made my usage of AI tenfold better is the statement, ask me any clarifying questions before you start writing.
Yes.
And it's interesting because it will start to say, okay, I understand what you're asking me to write or what feedback you're asking for. But before we go there, what are things to consider? And so I'll try just various prompts off the cuff of, how would I approach this hard conversation? Like the other day, I just for giggles was like, hey, if I was going to ask my boss for a raise, how would I do that? And what are the questions that I need to answer for them? And what assumptions are being made? And it broke it down. And it's like, what assumptions are being made that you deserve a raise? That's a hard truth, but it's true that the company has the money to do it. And not that I'm like actively looking for that. It was just the experimentation that I was doing with the tool. But the questions that it asks when you're saying, ask any clarifying questions can really get you to a good insight or a good answer the first time, versus just kind of casting a really wide net
Yeah.
and getting generic responses.
I think that prompting, the cues you put in, I think is what will make the difference between someone who gets a ton of value out of any of those AI tools. And I don't care what industry or business you're in, big, small. I know stay-at-home moms that use, Chat GPT to plan out their week, right? So they don't forget things, right? Which is it's like I didn't even thought about using it like that, right? But they have found a way. But it's all how they prompt, and that's the difference between someone who uses it for fun and games and just for topical things like, hey, tell me a joke or whatever, and someone who's actually leveraging it to be more productive. I always use the prompt of act as or behave as, and I put in, a CEO of a mid-market $250 million a year company, blah 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 blah, or as a board of directors, so forth, so on. What questions would those people have of this information I'm putting in? Like I'm writing a business plan right now for another idea I have, and I don't know if it will go anywhere, but I'm putting all those notes in. And I'm asking it if you were an investor, essentially, what questions would you have? And this prompts me, giving questions back, like, oh, that's a really good thought. I have an answer for that, but I didn't put it in my notes. Go back and put it in the notes, and it's helped me flesh it out. It's still my work, but it's helped me go through it in a way that I think is going to make it more powerful. Now, I will give a tip to the leather crafters out there, the business leather crafters out there. One way that I use AI, ChatGPT, on a very, very regular basis, right? We talked about Brandon earlier, Swifthammer Leather, and how he's very methodical with his numbers and things like that. That he has inputs to go in each shop. I use AI in so much the same way. I already have all the information. I went years ago. I've collected information, how much square footage is in each product, and the inputs and labor and all these different things. I've got all that stored in AI. So now I can literally bring it up and say, hey, I need to produce X amount of tally book covers in this leather. The leather costs X amount per square foot. How much leather do I need? Kicks it out for me right away. And that was information. I had spreadsheets that did all that for me, right? That I developed over the years. Now I have it all in AI, and I can very quickly say, on the phone, my wife, who's asked me a lot of these questions as I'm driving down the highway 80 miles an hour, I can't pull up my spreadsheet, but I can pull up my AI and talk to it and say, hey, how much leather do I need and hardware, and give me a list of everything I need for this product, because I already put that in there. Very, very, very useful way of doing it. That's still very topical, like formula driven solution, but AI is awesome. Once you open your mind up to it a little bit, there's a lot there you can use. But how you get the information in, the quality of information you get in, the prompts you use will absolutely determine the quality of information you get out of it. Doesn't do all the work for you, that's for sure.
Yeah, that's true. It'd be nice if it did, but
That's it.
not yet. So, well, any closing thoughts for this evening?
I'm going to leave it at that. I'll leave ChatGPT using it for estimating products and projects cost based on your inputs. It was a powerful thing for me. That was definitely a good one. I'm using it almost daily now for coding projects these days. That's my resource tip of the week.
Yeah, my resource tip of the week would be going back to the kind of customer insights piece. Find a Google form. They're free. Ask a couple of questions and send it out to your customer list, and maybe offer a promo code, maybe don't. Right? Like, you can incentivize them or not, but just see who your customer is, and it may not be who you assume it is. They may not be buying for the reasons that you think they're buying, and they may have stopped buying for reasons that you were totally unaware of. And so
Sure.
I think that's kind of my resource tip of the week is find ways that you can more effectively stop and listen to your customers very intentionally, because we all have a tendency to make assumptions about our businesses and what's working and what's not.
Yeah, very good. Very good point. Love it. Something we haven't done in the last few episodes is we haven't reminded everyone where they can contact us. Maybe something we've said today is going to allow somebody's going to give somebody some ideas. I love to be distracted from my work, to be honest with you, which is a little bit of a problem for me. But let's not shut off yet. If you have questions for me, and for you, how do they get a hold of us? Let's start with you. If someone has a question for you, where do they find you on the interwebs and on social channels?
Yeah, I'm on Instagram as Magnus Opus, and that's probably the easiest way. You can also contact me through my website, magnusopus.com.
Yeah.
Also, as I mentioned, I've been creating socials for this show. So if you want to reach out through Instagram or Facebook to Beyond the Workbench, I'll probably be the one to see it. So how about you? How can they get a hold of you?
Well, for me, you can reach me at, of course, odinleathergoods.com. That's the site. Probably the social channel I'm most active on, people know me for, is Instagram. That's just Odin Leather. You can also find me on YouTube, which is Odin Leather Goods. Facebook is also just Odin Leather. All those things work. Oftentimes, if you send me a message to those platforms, one of the young ladies in the retail store will oftentimes respond or see those first before I do, especially if it's during the day. Just put a note on there. Hey, I listened to the podcast and I had a question about something Odin was rambling on about, and then they'll assign it directly to me, and then I can answer it directly. So I still like very much so interact with everyone myself one-on-one when I can. Although sometimes it takes a little longer than it used to, but it's still a favorite activity of mine. So I hope people do reach out, ask questions. We'd love to talk to them. So you can reach us at Beyond the Workbench on Instagram, Beyond the Workbench on Facebook, and beyondtheworkbench.com online.
Post-production by Instrumental Media.